I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, August the 16th, and the North and the South. And I'm not necessarily talking about a battle, just a difference, a disparage between the North and the South. And I'm not talking about the east side of the country where the Mason-Dixon line makes the barrier. I'm talking about the central part of the United States where Interstate Highway 70 separates the North and the South. And that's about as good a barrier as I've ever seen that you can keep track of. But guys in the north part of that like to feed different type of cattle. It's not that the guys in the south don't like to feed those really good cattle too, but they're more willing to feed some plainer cattle. They're more used to getting the cattle put through the system as fast as possible, selling more on the average, where the guys in the north are looking for higher quality grades and really like the fancier kind of cattle, the more square made, English, solid colored, most of the time black, but not always. But in certain times of the year, like the late winter, early spring, you don't see that much difference because you see the guys in the north coming down and they don't mind buying some plainer cattle because they know they're going to be feeding them in the hot summer months, and if they don't have a lot of hair on them, it's not going to be that big a deal, and those cattle will feed right along. But now we're starting to get to the time of the year where guys start really splitting and sorting the cattle, and the better cattle are all mostly going north. By the time they get those cattle done, they'll be getting into some weather. You've got your farmer feeders in. They always like to feed better cattle. They just, and I hate to say they just like to feed the pretty cattle, but that they're more apt to give more for the kind of cattle that they like to feed. If they're going to have to get up every morning and feed those cattle, they're going to be right there at the house. Their neighbors are going to see them. They'd rather feed the better kind of cattle, and they'll feed those cattle longer and make them a higher quality grade. They'll be a little bit fancier to sell, and it's easier to get those cattle gone to your Northern Plains regionals of Nebraska beef and Greater Omaha. But we're sure seeing the difference between the North and the South this week. Last week we had a lot of good cattle in the Southern Plains. A lot of your farmer feeders were traveling down or sending orders down to get those cattle and bring them back up north. This week your farmer feeders are starting to get closer to thinking about getting into the field for harvest. They're still sending a few orders around, but more likely just local. A lot of them got filled up over the last couple of weeks. But your commercial feedlots, your bigger outfits, they're still battling over the North and the South cattle. But we'll talk a little bit more of that down a little bit later in the visit here. But let's look at the board for Wednesday. October live cattle up 27 cents to end the day at 109 even. August spot live cattle contracts up 35 cents to end the day at 108.32. October feeder cattle up 37 cents to close at 149.27 in your spot. August feeder cattle contracts up just 12 cents, settling at 149.05. Now fat cattle trade, we haven't seen of course the bulk of your trade or established a market yet, but there has been some sales through Tuesday. 8,650 head of cattle sold, negotiated cash in your 5-area feeding region, mostly of course in the Northern Plains, from 109 to 110 live, and dress basis 173. Wednesday morning had another 2,300 sell in Iowa, mostly at 110, and mostly from 173 to 174. So that little uptick ever so slightly on Tuesday in the board did help the market just a pinch, but like I said, we haven't decided on what the figure is going to be. The packers still refused to support the Fed Cattle Exchange. They had a light run, less than 500 head on there, and they just clicked right on, and nothing ever happened. Nobody bid, no nothing. And there's just not enough cattle on that thing, and your packers don't need them bad enough right now to really dig in on those cattle. I'd love it if some more people would support that Fed Cattle Exchange. If you're having trouble selling your fat cattle, you're not sure what to do, you know, you could consign them on there. If they could get enough cattle on there to really make a difference, it might entice some of the packers to come in and play a little bit more, especially down the road when numbers start to get tighter. But for now, as we've still got plenty of market ready supplies, they're not going to get in there and battle for those cattle and tip their hand and show what they're really willing to do on a Wednesday. Look at your box beef cutout values. Wednesday afternoon closed with choice cuts up 31 cents at 209.95, and you might notice that your select cuts are back over $200. They were higher earlier in the week, but on Wednesday down 66 cents at $200.61. Starting to spread that choice select spread out a little bit more as we're seeing more demand come in for your more expensive middle meat cuts, and they're going to want the choice. So we've seen the choice select spread out to $9.31 as of Wednesday afternoon. Your slaughter backed up just a little bit on Wednesday, but still 354,000 so far for the week, just 3,000 less than last week and 7,000 more than the same week a year ago. Look at your feeder cattle markets. Your real-time index continues to fall from where it was on Friday with those big specials up in the northern plains. Some of those sandhill cattle in Nebraska getting thrown in that index and really boosting it up there way over 150. We've fallen ever since then down to 146.97, down 48 cents on Wednesday compared to Tuesday's late day. But let's look at some feeder cattle auctions on Wednesday. OKC West had 6,000 head, including the 1,500 calves that they had on Tuesday, but still several yearlings there, around 4,500 there. Now you look at what's going on down in the southern plains. Not that we're not going to get any northern interest in El Reno, Oklahoma, but for the most part, those cattle are going to stay with your big commercial lots down in the southern plains. Your feeder steers were steady to $2 lower. Feeder heifers, you remember last week the heifers were all either just a pinch lower or steady, while the steers were quite a bit higher. But now your heifers have bounced right back $3 to $4 higher. The thing that cures a down market is a down market, and guys come in, they thinking last week, well, those heifers look like a bargain. We don't mind feeding heifers, and they all thinking the same way, and they come in there. And now your heifers have bounced right back up there to kind of a normal discount to what the steers are. Remember, the calves had a lower undertone on Tuesday. You look at some quotes here, and now I'm talking about different kinds of cattle and where those cattle could go. Had a big string of really top quality, fancy type, all solid colored, square made kind of steers in OKC West. 185 head of them, weigh 808 at 151.25. Now that's more than $4 over your index price there on your real-time index. Now look at some plainer cattle. Now nobody in El Reno is going to get their feelings hurt if I say they feed plainer cattle. A lot of them come out of North Texas. A lot of them have a little bit too much Bramer in them, but the commission's steady on those cattle, and they can sell those cattle, and they can sell them in big droves, but they're not going to bring as much, especially when you're seeing this big disparage between your northern type cattle and the cattle that the guys in the southern plains are willing to feed. But in El Reno, some plainer type cattle, the market reporter there called them straight twos. That would be pretty plain, guys, pretty narrow in the back end, and probably carrying too much ear. But 133 head of steers weighed 794 pounds at 138. Probably a lot of difference in the hair. The guys are just not willing to go north with those cattle, or they want to keep their order. So a lot of your guys in the north aren't nearly as worried about how much they cost as they are the quality as they step off the truck. But there's plenty of places in western Kansas and Oklahoma Panhandle, Texas Panhandle, more than willing to feed those plainer type cattle, especially whenever they're $13, $14 back of what some of the more expensive cattle cost. See, most all of your Mexican cattle are fed down the southern plains. There's a lot of plainer cattle down here, and I know that guys that live up in the Midwest, especially north of I-70, get to thinking that all the cattle in the world are black. and Big Square made fancy tops, but it's not true. They make them every color of the rainbow, and you can see them right down here in the Texas Panhandle and in western Kansas. But look at an individual quote out east. Bluegrass Stockyards, Albany, Kentucky. 60 head of steers, weighed 820 pounds there, 152, not too shabby. That's your feeder flash for Thursday.